Hello, I'm Ian, and welcome to Somerset News Network. Hang on a minute. We've got to do some things. We want some light here. Hang on a minute. Right. It's a bit bright. Let's turn it down. Right, is that better? Oh, I'm the wrong way round. Hang on. Is that better? And want me sign on the back, twist that a little bit. Right. Could do with a haircut, I think. It gets to a stage, the hair gets so long, and it's before Christmas, and you want to look quite nice. So, time for a haircut, I think. What do I want to talk about today? Well, we've got everything sorted out. We're now using this mic. I've got to put it a bit closer because it might be too far away. But it's quite a good mic. Got the boom set up here, but we're going to put it on the other side. Well, let's start again. I've run the intro. I'm Ian, and this is Somerset News Network. Now, I've got it all sorted out. So, as they say, let's get on with it. BBC bias, Trump suing BBC for 10 billion. Now, we've all seen the news. We've all seen how Panorama news program edited the video of Trump's speech and put it together to make it sound different than what it really was. Now, this isn't new for the BBC. The BBC is biased, and not only against Trump. There's certain stories that it will cover and they will be biased. They tell you they're the most trusted news organisation in the world. Like shit they are. When I was involved in the BBC in the early 80s, yes, we were. All I had to do is walk into a place. I was never paid by the BBC. I was on an internship on a community program, and I was doing interviews, going out doing interviews, getting the tape, editing the tape for another program. All I had to do was say, I'm local BBC, and it would open doors. It was brilliant. People would talk to me. But over the years, we found that the BBC have been biased. I didn't see it the 6 months I was with the BBC. As far as I'm concerned, everything was above board. But there was one incident. I was a gunsmith. I ran the local gun shop in Bristol, George Gibbs in Bristol. And I was asked to go in and do an interview about somebody shooting a duck on one of the ponds in Bristol with a crossbow. We sold crossbows and we sold bows and arrows. We sold them to people like the Scouts, and crossbows, mostly the people that bought the crossbows off us were tree surgeons to get the line up into a tree. I had to make a little ball up that would go on the top of a crossbow bolt, a longer bolt that stuck out the end with a ball on the end so it wouldn't stick into the timber. And I made a little ball up on the lathe and drilled a hole, and I aerodided it on. I think I made 2 or 3 of them for the tree surgeon. Worked a tree. He'd fire it up, put the small thin line up, and then pull the ropes up so the men could get up and cut the trees down. So everything that I saw crossbows being used was for legal use. But people could buy crossbows by mail order. And these kids, because we presume they were kids, in Bristol, shot a duck on the pond, and it was found. The RSPCA were called, and I was in the studio. They thought, because I sold crossbows, that I would defend it. They did not say anything about what I would say before I went into the studio. If they did, I would have told them. Anyway, I was up against an RSPCA inspector. You know, the one with the pips on the shoulder. Hang on, phone's going, back in a minute. Hello, I'm back. Right. So I'm in the BBC studio. We're in the green room, waiting to go in, and I'm with the RSPCA inspector. Now, what the BBC don't know is this RSPCA inspector, I repaired his gun the week before. I think I put a new striker in it or something in his shotgun. And now I'm in the studio with him. But the BBC don't know this. So they've got the RSPCA officer, obviously going to say that it's animal cruelty shooting with a bow, and they're expecting me to defend it. And this is the bias of the BBC. This is what they expected. Anyway, the RSPCA officer said his part, and I said he's absolutely right. But it is illegal to shoot a wild animal in the UK with a bow or crossbow. And if anybody knows any information about this or what happened, can they please let the police know? That was it. That was the end of the interview. We were booked in for 15 minutes and they wanted an argument. We didn't last 3 minutes. We were out of that door. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. We've got another segment coming up now. Sorry, we haven't got the time. And we were out the door. Because it's not what they wanted to hear. This is the bias of the BBC and how it works. As you know, I'm a gunsmith. And I've been campaigning to retain lead shot for shooting. Lead is a solid object. It's a natural object. It is not a pollutant. When I worked for the civil service, I was an advisor. I was working for one section. I was working in the planning department. And I was an AO. And because of my expertise with firearms and wildlife, I used to get asked to come down to the wildlife section. And they would ask me questions. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? And I would answer them the best I could. So when they were proposing a lead ban, and this is back in 99, mind, years ago, I was shown a letter, and in the letter they said, the problem we've got is getting our shooters to give up lead. And they said, oh, aren't they helping you? Aren't they on your side? I said, well, they're supposed to be. Well, why aren't they defending your corner? And I said, I don't know. They said, if there is no scientific evidence to ban lead shot. Anyway, I then was going to do a BBC interview. Now, they'd already been to the WWT at Slimbridge, and shown a duck, looked like he was drunk, falling about. They said, oh, that's because of lead. No scientific proof, it was just said. And the BBC followed it. And I was going to say to the BBC that they have to prove that it was lead. And they can't. Because no autopsy was done on the duck. I said it looked more like the duck had a stroke. He might have been shot and wounded. We don't know. I said, if there was an autopsy on it and you could prove it, you just can't say, oh, that's because of lead. I never got into the studio because it didn't fit the BBC narrative. They wouldn't let me speak. Strange, isn't it? So, you look at the BBC and how they promote a certain lifestyle. They promote transgenderism. I think that's the correct word to use. They've got drag queens and transvestites all over the place. Oh, they don't call them transvestites now. They're transgender. Well, when I was growing up, a guy that wore a dress was called a transvestite. You also have, they say, oh, what about pantomime dames? Pantomime dames are not living as females. Pantomime dames are a bloke dressed as a woman, and it's for an act. And they're a pantomime dame. I've got no problems with that. But they're not transgender. So if you talk about transgenderism, you're ousted by the BBC. They promote a lifestyle. You know, there's a girl, Rosie Parker, or is her nickname, and she campaigns to stop men in dresses going into ladies' toilets. She can't get on the BBC. They won't even interview her. This is the bias of the BBC. And then you've got LGBTQ. Now, LGBTQ split because of transgenderism. And the lesbian, bisexual and gay people got together and formed their own organisation. LBG. Never see them on the BBC. It's always Stonewall and LGBTQ. That's the bias of the BBC. That's how they work. There was a video on YouTube, it's got to still be there, of a BBC meeting explaining climate change to its reporters. It said the question of global warming has been answered. There's no need to question it. And they won't. You phone the BBC up on a telephone app to have a go at a programme to explain that there's no global warming. They will not put you on. I've tried it 3 or 4 times. And they will not put you on. At all. They said, oh, the science is settled. The science is bogus. And in the time that they released, it was called the ClimateGate emails. And they took the emails. Now, we don't know if they were released or if they were hacked, but they ended up on a website. And you could download the files, which I did. I had them on day 2. I was talking to a group, on a news group. And they were scientists, and I think some of them were MI5 and MI6 and CIA retired. You know, they were a good bunch of blokes. I was on there to talk about firearms. And Then ClimateGate emails came out and we found them and discussed them. I went through all the emails. I went to London. It took me 2 hours on the train to go up to London. Took my laptop, plugged it into the wall on the train, and I went through all the emails. I was going to an NGO meeting in London with the Department of the Environment and the Forestry Commission, with the civil service. And I found an email which said, and it was an email from the Met Office to the University of East Anglia. Dr. Jones was in charge then. I don't know if it was to Dr. Jones, but that was the guy that took the credit for the climate models. And they said the Earth was warming up, and they did all the CO2, and they tested the CO2 in the ice and all the rest of it, and tree rings and all the rest of it. And they produced climate models. Well, at the time, the scientists on our side were saying junk in, junk out. That was the thing that was going round our group. This email told the scientists who were doing the modelling on global warming not to come up with scenarios to prove that it's normal, that the weather patterns were normal. So they oppressed and put a straight line on the middle ages warm period, and then the hockey stick went up, and that was released by a guy called Mann who was working with them in America. And the emails were how they were going to fiddle the figures. 1.5% on here, 1.5% off of there, 0.58 and 0.8% on there. So they levelled it up so they could get the hockey stick. Medieval warm period they wiped out. The BBC believed it and promoted it. That is the bias of the BBC. They would never let me talk about it. I rung up 3 or 4 times saying they got it wrong. And I can prove it. I was never allowed to go on the BBC. So that's the bias of the BBC. It's not only Donald Trump. It's in every walk of life you can imagine. And that is the bias of the BBC. They have to get back to their core values. They've got the BBC Charter. They know what to do. They think because we can't see it, they can get away with it. Well, Donald Trump has proven they can't. Now, it doesn't mean that the BBC are going to have to pay $10 billion. That's only the starting bid. That figure could be lower. But that is what Donald Trump is asking for. A £10 million for defamation. And it's all in black and white. And it's thanks to the Telegraph who reported on this. And then they found another one. And they found a third one as well now. So if this is all added to the court case, BBC haven't got a leg to stand on. Hang on a minute. Let me have a drink. Throat's getting dry. I tend to make myself a brew, put it in a flask cup, and it lasts for an hour then, so it doesn't get cold. Anyway, I think I've said enough. I think I've proved the BBC are biased, and they've got to get back to their core values. Anyway, Ian, Somerset News Network, bye-bye for now.